Well, good evening, everyone. We've got another live broadcast tonight. We've got a guest, a fellow lawyer of mine, Leslie J. Smith, and we're going to be talking about the already infamous high school teacher at Oakville Trafalgar High School. We're going to talk about some of the employment law implications of that, talk a little bit of Canadian culture, how we got here, and looking forward to another great live chat. Thank you for joining us. Good evening. My name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So as I mentioned in the preamble, we have a guest, one of my colleagues from the bar, Leslie J. Smith. She's a employment law and human rights lawyer practicing in Oakville, also an arbitrator. She's got little over 34 and a half years experience. She also was a small claims judge for 17 years. So Leslie, thank you very much for joining us. And just to start things up, I want to ask you about your Twitter handle, the bar sitter.
Well, thanks for having me on, Nicholas. It's good to see you, and glad you're doing well. So barsitter@gmail.com is my Gmail address, and that's my Twitter handle. Okay, so as I was explaining to you before, I went to open a Gmail account, and I wanted to put in barrister, but I misspelled it, and it came out barsitter. And then when I tried to go back and put in barrister, it had already been taken. So I thought, okay, I'll go with the bar sitter. And then I thought, well, that's kind of a cool name anyway. So it just worked. And apparently I'm the only one in the world who has that. So that's it.
Great. Well, it's the classic typo that you ran with.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
All right. So yeah, we've got the show. I mean, this is something happening right in your backyard in Oakville. This teacher at the Oakville Trafalgar High School.
Right.
His name's been well hidden thus far, but I think everyone knows who we're talking about. I'm not going to show a picture because, frankly, the images are just so offensive, and I mean, just especially contemplating that people's children we're talking about here are being exposed to that. So I know it's something that's a bit of a hot topic, and so I wanted to talk to you, starting with because as a human rights lawyer and an employment lawyer, you've probably got things to say from the perspective of the parents and the perspective of this person. So the thing I wanted to start off with is your thoughts from an employment law perspective. The school is hiding behind human rights and employment law, saying, well, there's nothing we can do. He, she, it is allowed to dress however they want. We can't do anything. Our hands are completely tied. But that seems to be my understanding of their position. I mean, is that actually true from an employment law perspective?
No, and it's not actually. So there's a few pieces of legislation that impact this situation. But the one thing I want to say, first of all, and kind of coming from the perspective of a judge and arbitrator, which is to be objective, I have not talked to the teacher, who I will just refer to as Lemieux. And I don't know if anyone else has talked to Lemieux. Certainly not the press. And certainly not anybody that I know of outside of the school. And so there are just some theories floating around about why this teacher is doing what he is doing. And I'm going to say he, because until we know for sure what's going on with transitioning, to me, it looks like a male dressing as a woman. Okay. So I'm just going to use he, and I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but that's just what I'm going to do. So we don't have any idea why he is acting like this. And so it's very easy to call names and, call him a pervert and all the rest of it. But in reality, I prefer not to do that. I prefer to just remain as objective as possible, understanding that I personally am pretty offended by what I see as a woman. I think this getup is just highly offensive to women. It's just a grotesque denigration of the female body. And I don't understand why he's doing this. So there are theories floating around, and one of them is that he got into trouble with the school board last year. I read something, and again, it was online, so I have no proof of any of this. So I'm just going to tell you what the theory is. A theory is that he got into trouble somehow. He was labeled as toxic masculinity, whatever that means. And he's just trying to make a point with the board and kind of show how ludicrous they are in terms of their wokeness. Okay, that's a theory. I have no evidence for that. As I say, I haven't talked to Lemieux, and I don't think anybody else has. Okay, so the other theory is that he's transitioning. Maybe he is, but maybe he isn't. If what he's doing is just dressing up as a woman, or what he thinks is a woman, that doesn't necessarily mean he's transitioning. So back to your question, the board is kind of trying to hide behind its policies, which are formulated around the Human Rights Code, Ontario Human Rights Code, and they are formulated around the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which I'm going to get to in a minute. And as far as I know, the only interview that Mr. Ennis, who's the Director of Education for the Halton District School Board, gave an interview to David Menzies of Rebel News a few days ago. And all he said was, we support our teachers, and just these general statements about this. So yeah, to your point, Nicholas, the director does seem to be hiding behind the Human Rights Tribunal, or excuse me, the Human Rights Code, in terms of respect for people who are transitioning. But that theory, he's just running off the theory, or maybe he knows something I don't know, but that's all founded upon the presumed fact that this person is actually transitioning. I don't know if he is or he isn't. He might just be trying to make a point. And so I think what we need to do is, avoid calling him names or whatever. I know it's very offensive what he's doing, but until somebody talks to him and finds out what the motive is, we really can't say for sure, oh, he's transitioning, or, oh, he's trying to get back at the school board. And so that would be just I think we just need to kind of lower the temperature a little bit, not taking away from how offensive this actually is. Well, yes, what they've been doing, at least that's what Mr. Ennis was saying to Rebel News, is that they're just hiding behind, as you say, the Human Rights Code. So I could stop there, and you can ask another question.
Well, I mean, just when you're saying the Human Rights Code, I think the thing they're ignoring is that the Human Rights Code only requires accommodation up to the point of undue hardship. Isn't there a hardship and an undue hardship to children being exposed to this?
Yeah. Well, you would have thought so. If you just listen to and again, I haven't had a chance to speak to Mr. Ennis or anyone else inside the school, but going off of what he said to Rebel News, yes, he's not considering the children. And there always is a balancing act. There's a balancing act in charter arguments. There's a balancing act in human rights issues, etc. But in my mind, I would say that there shouldn't be a balancing act. In my mind, I think children should come first. The rights and care and concern of minors, it should be paramount in any situation, in family law matters, in custody battles. And certainly the jurisprudence around custody battles are what's in the best interest of the child. I was speaking today to a father who has children at that school. I'm not going to say how old they are or anything, but he was telling me that there's a lot of children in the school are really upset. They really feel intimidated. They feel because the school has told them that they have to be supportive of this. They had the principal came on and said, well, we need to be supportive of all of this. Well, okay, if that's true, if that's what the principal did, then I would say to you that I think it's fair to conclude that the principal is not placing the children's best interests ahead of the teacher in question. And I I feel confident in saying that, particularly because I don't know whether or not this teacher is genuinely transitioning. I can't imagine that this teacher is doing any favors to the community that finds itself needing to transition from one gender to the other. This is a parody. And I think, and this particular father I spoke to said, children in the school have friends who are LGBTQ, et cetera, and they're really disgusted with this too. So, we need to hear from all of these groups as to me, this is kind of bordering on indecent. And I remember I sent you an email asking you to maybe check into that if you had time, because there's a provision in the criminal code about decency, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
For sure, we'll definitely talk about that in a bit. But I just, before we go over to that, I wanted to just talk a little bit more about the employment law, because to me this is just it's so ironic that after 2 years, or at least over a year of being told, well, as an employee, you have no rights. If you don't take this medical treatment that your employer wants you to take, too bad. I mean, I've had to consult with a lot of people and tell them that the fact of the law is that you can be fired at any time for no reason, as subject only to proper notice, being termination without cause. So it's just ironic that, you can just terminate everyone under the sun without cause or with cause, apparently, if they don't agree with their employer's medical dictates. But then we're going to really bend over backwards in a situation where I think children are at risk. From what you're describing of what you heard from that father, that sounds like children are at risk by this scenario.
That's what he was saying. He felt that the children are at risk, and that the situation just seems to be escalating out of control and nothing is really being done. And so I wanted to come back to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, because this has direct impact here. So the Occupational Health and Safety Act really addresses, it's an old act, and it first came around when there were deaths at construction sites and so forth. It's a very old act, and it was put in, promulgated and given royal assent last century to address unsafe workplaces. Now, in the last, I forget which year it was, I think it was 2016, they added a section to the Occupational Health and Safety Act that spoke directly to harassment in the workplace, including sexual harassment and violence in the workplace. And that is now a topic, and can, you can do something with that. In other words, they've sort of codified the fact that there shouldn't be any, or there should at least be policies, and there should be procedures around workplace harassment and violence. And so under Section 32, in case anyone's interested, you can look at it. There is a requirement, a statutory requirement, where there is an incident and complaint of workplace harassment, which includes sexual harassment, there must be a workplace investigation conducted. So I would suggest that, well, it's not a suggestion, there is a mandate that this school perform a workplace investigation. And given the nature of what's going on, I would, if they asked me for my legal advice, I would tell them, go and get an outside firm, preferably a lawyer, to conduct a workplace investigation. And in the course of that, that person would speak to Lemieux and speak to any witnesses, which may include students and teachers, because I can't imagine every single teacher in that school is just completely fine with what's going on. And in the course of doing that investigation, then presumably the investigator would uncover the motives here and what's really going on. And with a view to trying to get this situation resolved without further upset and chaos and protesting and all the rest of it. And possibly avoiding firing the teacher, although I know a lot of people are saying that teacher should be fired immediately and so on and so forth. But what I don't know is whether an investigation has been completed. But in case the school board is listening to this podcast, there is an absolute statutory duty to conduct an investigation. It has to be done. And if it's not done, the Ministry of Labor will go in and force it to be done. And it should be done properly, because if it's not done properly, then there are cases where damages are awarded against employers who conduct an improper investigation. So it's not sort of a laughing matter to just say, oh, I don't have to do that. Well, you do, and you have to do it properly. And that should be done. That would be item number one, is what I would say to the school board.
So we have a question from Lori Carter. So Lori, thanks for watching. And she's asking, what's the school's dress code for students and teachers?
Right.
Do you know what the dress code is? Now, I know I've seen some in the news articles that people have raised the dress code, and the school board's answer has been, well, that only applies to students, not to staff.
Yeah,
but do you know what the dress code for students is?
I do a list of things, and on the bottom, I think it says something like not to wear clothing that exposes genitals and erect nipples and all the rest of it. So everything that the Miss Lemieux is doing is actually described in the students' dress code as a big no-no. There is no dress code for the teachers, but there is a code of conduct. And in that code of conduct, it does say that the teacher is to encourage the students to abide by the dress code for the students, and to not be a distraction, and to help the students be focused on their learning, and so on and so forth. You can imagine what it says.
Right.
So last Friday, I wrote to the school, the principal and the school board, and raise this with them to say, look, that's true. There is no dress code for the teachers, but there is a code of conduct which requires them not to do anything that forms a distraction, so that the students can't function properly. They can't practice. And of course, there's all these safe procedures and so on. And I posed the question in my letter, if a student can't dress like that, why can this teacher? And then if this teacher can, then why can't the students?
Right.
And they've put themselves into a really awkward, hypocritical corner.
Right. And I think, the whole distraction thing, it's not just the sexual aspect. I think it's the political aspect of really making a very overt statement. Let's be honest. I think this is another one of the things that people find very frustrating. Imagine if there was some teacher who was some sort of, as the media would say, fundamentalist Christian, and they showed up to class wearing, I don't know, like some big, huge, bloody crucifix imagery on their shirt. Mm-hmm. Oh, I think they'd be treated very differently by the school board than this individual is being treated.
Yeah. So it's interesting you bring that up. So in the course of preparing for this, I came across the most unbelievable section in the Education Act. My eyes came out on stalks when I read this. So the Education Act, I would submit to you, is sort of the overarching legislation that applies to all education in this province. And so I came across the section Duties of Teachers. So here is, under the Education Act, the duty of a teacher and a temporary teacher. Subheading, religion and morals. Subsection C, to inculcate, which means to install by persistent instructions, by precept and example, respect for religion and the principles of Judeo-Christian morality, and the highest regard for truth, justice, loyalty, love of country, humanity, benevolence, sobriety, industry, frugality, purity, temperance, and all other virtues. This is the duty of a teacher, to install by persistent instructions and example respect for religion and the principles of Judeo-Christian morality, and they list them and then say, and all other virtues.
Wow. I kept waiting for the punchline where you were going to say that the Education Act actually prohibits teachers from inculcating those things.
No.
So because
Isn't that amazing?
Because my impression is that the exact opposite is what goes on. I mean, promoting sobriety, purity, love of country.
Yeah.
I mean, my children don't go to government school, but my impression from speaking to people whose children do is that is absolutely not that's taught. And to the contrary,
no,
it's actually the opposite. Like love of country, you're a racist, you're a colonialist if you love your country.
Yeah. But this isn't just to teach. It's to act in accordance with these principles, as an example, respect for religion and respect for the principles of Judeo-Christian morality and the highest, and demonstrating the highest regard for all of this truth, justice, loyalty. And okay, is there truth here? I don't think so. I don't think there's much truth going on here. Is this teacher really behaving in a truthful manner? Or is this teacher behaving in with sobriety and frugality and purity and all other virtues? And, you could go to the Bible and read in Galatians 5, chapter 22, all the virtues of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Not much self-control here.
Certainly doesn't look that way. No,
it is a fascinating section, and I just can't believe that I found it.
I can't believe that's still in there. I can't believe that the Education Act still says that.
I know, right? I hope by bringing this to light, somebody doesn't bring a motion in the provincial parliament to get rid of it, but it's there, isn't it? And so if I was going to be retained and write a letter to the school, I would certainly be citing this as, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. And this is what's not happening, right? So
yeah, and as they like to say, the law is the law. So
yeah, right.
You may tell us you don't like that, but that's what the law is. So
yeah.
Well, wow, that's really interesting. But
no kidding.
let me take that and kind of segue into the Indecent Act aspect under the criminal code. So the short answer is it's not an indecent act as defined by the criminal code.
Okay.
So let me just give you a quick rundown on that. So indecent acts fall under section 173 of the criminal code. And that says that 173 sub 1 says that everyone who willfully does an indecent act in a public place in the presence of one or more persons or in any place with intent to insult or offend any person is guilty of an indictable offense. So the issue, I think, usually in trying to prove these is how do you prove the intent to insult or offend any person? And also, what is indecency? So let me give a bit of context, because, of course, we live in a common law jurisdiction. So the case law is always very important. So the leading case from the Ontario Court of Appeal is Her Majesty the Queen and Jacob. It's a 1996 decision from the Ontario Court of Appeal. And they examined specifically what constitutes an indecent act for the purposes of that section. And that involved a case of a woman who was arrested for walking on a public street with completely uncovered, no top, no bra, breasts completely uncovered.
Yeah.
Several people, including police officers who were called, saw her. When police confronted her, she refused to cover up. And then she was ultimately arrested because people were complaining to police that seeing her walk around like this was upsetting them and their family. They had children around, and she was ultimately arrested. So she was convicted at trial. She appealed to the Summary Conviction Appeal Court, Superior Court of Justice. They dismissed her appeal, but then the Court of Appeal, they allowed the appeal. So they set aside the conviction and said that wasn't indecent. So, I mean, when we're in a scenario where the Ontario Court of Appeal says that a woman walking completely bare-breasted, no shirt, no bra, nothing on, that's not indecent, then I don't see how this is indecent.
Right.
Now, I mean, people will say, well, that's outrageous. I mean, I'm not here to debate the Ontario Court of Appeal's decision. I'm just telling you that's the law as it stands.
Right. Well, with respect to those facts, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think.
But I think you're right. I don't think this is. I think it would be a bit of a waste of time to take this to a Crown attorney
Well, yeah. I mean, in practice, I mean, in law, they'd already be able to say, look, if that's not indecent, this isn't indecent. But in practice, there's no way a charge would stick because, again, I'm all about talking about the practical reality of the situation, not how I want the law to be or how the law should be. And the practical reality of the situation, in my view, is that people who self-identify as LGBTQ2S plus, they hold a privileged position in society. And they will not be charged in circumstances where if someone who isn't part of that group did something similar would be charged. I mean, that's my personal view, just from what I've seen. I think, you know, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I mean, we've seen so much of that the last 2 years. I think this is just another aspect of that.
Yeah, and I think that the people are saying enough, you know, enough already. This is children are being disturbed, and just to come back to the Education Act, I was looking for any kind of penalties or whatever, and I found Section 212 of the Education Act says that every person who willfully interrupts or disquiets the proceedings of a school or class is guilty of an offense and on conviction is liable to a fine of not more than $200. But the point of the matter is not the $200. It's the fact that people are people. Doesn't say it can't be a teacher. It just says every person who willfully interrupts or disquiets the proceeding. I think you could safely say that the school is in a state of disquiet. You know, anyway, the point is that the Education Act, I think, does come to the rescue here for the parents who are upset about this, as does the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And also the Halton District School Board has their own policies. One of them is called Respectful Workplace Administrative Policy, which includes sort of a prohibition on being disrespectful. Not just not to prohibit harassment, but to prohibit disrespect, which is interesting. So, you know, when I saw these pictures, I thought that's just so unbelievably disrespectful of women, and to be doing this in front of young children. It's like you're foisting your whatever's going on, whether mental illness or fetish or revenge or whatever's going on, to be doing it in that fashion is really. It's really akin to sexual harassment, I feel, and sexual intimidation, and especially for children who, generally speaking, cannot stand up for themselves, or they don't want to, in case they get bullied by other students.
Or by the staff. I mean, it's a power imbalance because
it's a total power.
Have a position of authority and trust.
It is a total power imbalance, and that's within the confines of employment law, there is a theory that employees and employers are never on the same playing field. And that's why there's a very vast body of implied rights and obligations at common law, even if the written contract between the parties either doesn't exist or doesn't cover all of the issues. And so surely there is an even greater power imbalance between a student, a child under the age of 18 or in school, and teachers who are supposed to be in authority over them, and police officers. And I mean, I'm sure if you do any youth work, Nicholas, you know that youth often have a pretty bad time of it with police officers. And although, some of the youth are pretty difficult to deal with, but some of them are not. So the point here is that the district school board, and you can go and look this up, they have a policy, Respectful Workplace Administrative Policy. And it says that a complaint by a student who believes they're being disrespected or harassed can start this process and make a complaint, et cetera. And it goes on, and then there's an investigation and so on and so forth. So there is some protection within the board policy itself that will help a student if they want to start this process. But, and again, I reiterate, I have not had a chance to talk to Mr. Ennis or anybody inside the school. So I don't know what they're doing. I just have a report from a father today that the school is really trying to not coerce, but, encourage the students to be all in support of what's going on. And if that's true, I just think that's just a total breach of duty. Surely we owe, as adults, we owe our children a duty of care, for heaven's sake. And if in fact Lemieux is transitioning, why he could go and buy some prosthetic of some normal size and not look like just a buffoon. I'm sorry, but it's outrageous what he's doing. And that's why I really question, what is the motive behind this? And a good workplace investigation will get to the bottom of that. And so if I am retained, the first thing I'm going to do is write to the school. I'm going to quote to them that lovely section in the Education Act. And also I'm going to say, you must conduct a workplace investigation. And if you don't start it within a certain date, then I'll just have the Ministry of Labor come in and order it.
So I'm just going to kind of jump in there. We've got about little under 15 minutes left. So if there's anyone who's joining us late, this is Don't Talk TV, a live broadcast. I'm talking with Leslie J. Smith, an employment and human rights lawyer with over 34 years experience. And we've been discussing this teacher at the Oakville Trafalgar High School. I'm sure everyone's seen the pictures with the gigantic prosthetic breasts, and some that we've been talking about human rights and employment law issues, and some things, very interesting things that Leslie found under the Education Act. So I just want to encourage viewers to give us questions if you've got any before we run out of time here. So now over the next 10 minutes or so, that's your chance to ask questions if you have any. But one thing I wanted to touch on is, Leslie, you've talked about the importance of an investigation into this, and we talked about the theory that's out there. I've seen it as well. Some people claiming that this individual is doing this is kind of a quote unquote troll job to kind of bring this out into the light. So, if that is actually the case, I think I know the answer. But from what you've been saying about all the law involved, if that is actually the case, it sounds like it'd probably actually be way worse for this person and way easier for the school to terminate him if he is doing it as some sort of political stunt.
Yeah. Well, okay. One thing I'm not, Nicholas, is I am not a labor lawyer. So a labor lawyer deals with union workers. And I presume that this teacher is a member of the union. And so the unions there's a general management clause under the collective bargaining agreement that allows the employer of a unionized worker to make decisions based on general management, sort of a broad perspective. Because a collective bargaining agreement tends to cover off all the eventualities of the terms and conditions of employment, et cetera. So what I don't know, because I haven't read the collective agreement here, and assuming the teacher is a member of the union, I don't know whether or not this would be grounds for dismissal. I would have to say it would be, but as part of my experience as a lawyer, I've also done a tremendous amount of mediation. My initial gut sense is to first conduct a workplace investigation to find out what are the motives here, try to settle it, try to get this person to stop doing what they're doing, or if they really are transitioning, do it more normally, if that's possible, with not this ridiculous outfit. And if that won't work, then look at termination, if it's possible within the framework of the collective bargaining agreement. So that's a whole body of law that I don't have any experience in. So, it's very easy to say, fire him. Okay. Yes, teachers can be fired if I presume, but and then they can grieve it, I suppose. But I'm saying, can we arrive at some kind of settlement here?
Well, teachers can absolutely be fired if they make private medical decisions that are not consistent with what their school wants. I've certainly dealt with that. In terms
Right.
of being fired for other things, not so easy. But we just had a question while you're talking there from Marty McKay asking, does mens rea really matter here? I mean, or does it really apply in this case? I mean, in criminal law, mens rea always matters. I mean, that's just how our criminal law works. You have to have the criminal act and the criminal intent. And I imagine it's, I think with the importance of an investigation that you've stressed is that the intention plays a role in employment law as well.
Well, it does and it doesn't. I mean, with respect to how this matter is resolved, I think it would be critical to find out why he is behaving in this way. What's the reason? Mm-hmm. And maybe, you know, if he's seeking revenge for some reason, maybe there's another reprimand pathway for that. I don't know. I'd have to read the collective agreement. So the question is, does mens rea apply? No. Mens rea is a concept that relates to criminal law. I don't believe this is a criminal situation, as you've already described, Nicholas. But in purpose, what I was trying to say is to figure out why he's doing this is to try to sort out, is there a way to mediate a settlement here so that everybody's needs are met, whatever they are, particularly the needs of the children. And if we find out that he's just being bloody minded and he's trying to seek revenge, then, you know, maybe he should be fired.
I think he should. I mean, some people have said, oh, well, if this is a troll job, you know, it's the most epic troll job and he deserves a medal. I strongly disagree, because you're using children as political pawns. I don't care which side of this argument you're on. You don't involve children in this. So I would agree with you. If it is a troll job, I think that's just as bad, if not worse.
It's almost, in a way, it's insolence and kind of insubordination, right? So, I mean, if he's, you know, clearly he's in breach of the code of conduct for teachers because he's a distraction. Mm-hmm. And there's other sections of the code as well. And he's in breach of the Education Act, and he's not fulfilling his duty under that particularly unique section, which we went over. So there's lots of ways of criticizing and finding, you know, being able to declare with foundation that he's in breach of various codes of conduct. The problem that we have here is that it appears as though the board is just taking his side holus bolus because they lack the courage, or they, you know, they're woke. They're so woke they can't figure themselves out, and then the parents really need to. And I don't know if there's a parent board here or parent PTA or whatever they call it. That so anyway, there's much to be discovered here that I don't know. I'm outside the castle gates, right?
Right.
For now.
Yeah. Now, I mean, another thing, I think the question about mens rea that it brings up is, I think what Mr. McKay may have been suggesting is, like, does it matter what this person's intention is from a moral perspective or a non-legal perspective? And I think it is important to make the distinction between law and general morality, or what's right and wrong, because I mean, that's a lot of times people see things, they're outraged and say, oh, well, you know, that should be a crime. Even, for example, when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did his infamous, you know, how long do we let these people take up space? Do we tolerate them? People saying, well, he should be charged criminally. But I mean, the criminal law is meant for very specific things. It's not meant for enforcing morality.
Right.
And so things can still be totally wrong without being criminal.
Right.
So, you know, and then from,
I think that to get back to the mens rea thing, I mean, let's say, for example, and this is a theory, that this person is really mentally disturbed. Okay. So what's the compassionate thing to do? To make them go on a leave of absence, not necessarily to, you know, give them the capital punishment of employment law, and that is, you know, fire them. And that's the only reason I'm suggesting that we need to understand why he's doing what he's doing. I'm not saying that what he's doing is acceptable. I'm not. I don't think it's acceptable at all. But in terms of how do we deal with it, we need to know why he's doing this. He should be put on a leave of absence right away. Like, get out of the classroom.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to fire him right away. I think we need to at least get him out. And, usually what happens, Nicholas, is where there's a workplace investigation. Let's say a worker says, my boss sexually harassed me. Usually what happens is the boss is put on a paid leave of absence, removed from the workplace, and then the investigation occurs. And then, depending on what the result of that investigation is, the supervisor comes back, or they're let go, or whatever. And that's really what should happen here. He should be removed from the classroom, put on a paid leave of absence. An investigation should be done. And then we can sort out later. Once we have all the facts, we can sort out, what do we do with him? Do we cut him off? Do we send him for therapy? What do we do? But we need to get him out of the classroom for sure.
Yeah. Now, I think one point I want to make, though, is this is a point that I make many times on my channel, is, again, I didn't make up this phrase. I take it from Mark Stein, but I think it's just such a accurate statement that, the law is downstream of politics, and politics are downstream of culture. So, I mean, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it didn't come out of nowhere.
No.
I mean, people are all outraged by this, but part of my perspective is like, well, where was the outrage decades ago when they're putting in these crazy, sex education stuff where they're teaching children in, like, I don't know, kindergarten or grade 1 about anal sex and how good it is, and teach them things like that. I mean, to me, that stuff's that's been around for decades. That's as bad or worse. Now, I know there have been protests, and Doug Ford somewhat changed the sex education as a result to people pushing back on that, but didn't really change it that much. So I think we need to be aware of, like, this didn't come from nowhere. This has been brewing for a long time, and maybe it's a bit of a flashpoint, but people need to realize, really, with all due respect, parents, you allowed this by being okay with all the stuff that's been going on for years and years and years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a complex situation, isn't it, too, Nicholas? Because it came in sort of incrementally, right?
Oh, and the classic boiling the frog in the pot.
Well, I was just going to say, that's exactly it. And I mean, I would put a biblical spin on this, and I would say to you, when we took God out of the classroom, we took God out of our life and put him on the shelf. Then should we really be surprised that, I mean, look, that section in the Education Act very clearly talks about Christian Judeo principles and morals, and morality should be taught in the classroom. Whatever happened to that? So I don't want to get into a big harangue about that, but I'm just saying, I'm just reiterating your point and coming at it from a different perspective, just to say that, when we abandon morality, whether it comes from God or Allah, or wherever it comes from, we can't be too surprised when these kinds of things happen. But maybe this is a good wake-up call.
Yeah, it may be. So I think that's a perfect place to end it. We're just coming up on 7:30. And so, Leslie, I want to thank you very much for joining me. It's been a great discussion. I hope viewers found it interesting and helpful and informative.
Yeah.
So, of course, I have to give the mandatory disclaimer that this chat of ours is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, contact a lawyer. You can call either of us if you have something. Criminal law is my area, although I also do human rights law, constitutional law, military law. If you have an employment human rights issue and you're in the Oakville area, you can call Leslie J. Smith, or the other lawyers you can call. And of course, if you have any show topics you'd like to see me cover, please send us an email or leave a comment in the comment section. And of course, if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And Leslie, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas. It was really nice to talk with you tonight.
Likewise.
Yeah.